And the foundational transaction in finance is collateral. So most people think liquidity really comes from trading activity, that's what makes a difference, my ability to convert dollars to shares of Tesla. Yeah, that's important, but by far that's a drop in the bucket compared to transactions in liquidity that have to do with borrowing and lending. So there are transactions. Repurchase agreements are the way that banks get liquidity. So they take assets, high quality assets like treasuries, and when they need cash, they post them as collateral and borrow cash from one another in a model called repurchase agreements or repos. That transaction is the most dominant transaction of any globally on a daily basis. Over $20 trillion a day. I think it's even more than that. But anyway, roughly that amount is in that transaction. Well, it turns out blockchain is the perfect technology. Perfect. It's like tailor-made. It's the killer app for blockchain to do.
But I think about 2 years ago, I made a post that I think collateral management is the killer app for blockchain. Collateral management is the killer app for blockchain. So as you can imagine, we're very focused on collateral management.
So many phenomenal things happened in terms of the Canton network and the development behind the scenes, partnerships, new super validators, just a whole bunch of crazy stuff that took place on Canton. I'm going to continue to show you guys that I believe that they're one of the blockchains, the layer ones, that is going to survive long term, regardless of what you believe about the tokenomics or whatever the case may be. All that stuff right now and the price is completely irrelevant. Okay. You should only be focused on the price right now if you're a day trader. If you have day trading skills and you understand how to maximize, you understand how to maximize leverage to your benefit to day trade these assets. And if not, then right now the price of these assets doesn't really matter. Okay. And so with that in mind, a lot of these layer ones, it's starting to come to surface, it's starting to come to light that they actually don't have what it takes for institutional adoption at scale. And in my personal opinion, Canton has shown multiple times that it not only has the institutional interest, but it also has the ability for these institutions to adopt it and generate revenue while preserving privacy. And that alone within itself is commendable, right? So we're going to break down some massive developments unfolding around the Canton network, updates that could have major implications for the future of tokenization, institutional finance, and where digital assets may be headed next. And then I'll leave you guys for the remainder of the weekend. Starting off here, this was a trade talks conversation that had taken place, and we have the CEO of Canton Digital Asset Holdings, or what is it? Canton Strategic Holdings, excuse me, the first Canton native digital asset treasury. I believe that their name before this was Theramune, if I'm not mistaken. They rebranded to Canton Strategic Holdings. And I just want to start off with him talking about, because I believe this is the first time that he's spoken on a panel discussion or on an interview podcast since they rebranded to Canton Strategic Holdings. And he goes on to talk about how Canton allows institutions to rewire their systems. Take a second here and listen to what he has to say.
Yeah, so I think if you think about institutional adoption, they require certain elements. So it's the regulatory component. We've gotten some clarity on different things, and there will be, hopefully, pardon the pun, the Clarity Act that eventually gets passed that will give further clarity to probably more so traditional markets than crypto native firms. But that also requires the configurable privacy element that Canton's focused on, but also a governance structure and a tokenomics policy that doesn't just play to the original creators of the blockchain, but also has an element of governance that gives that trust element to allow institutions to come and build and make that investment to rewire their systems and their tokenized deposits.
And I think that's where the competitive advantage is, right? It is being able to show that your governance is being executed upon. So in the absence of a framework, this is really where your advantage and differentiation is.
Correct. It's definitely about trying to find a middle ground between complete DeFi, decentralized, and have some sort of framework that it gives that trust and governance structure that institutions require. You can't rely on someone else's compliance to do that. Regulators don't give you that second chance, and you only get one chance to really make that inroads to institutions. And that's why, Canton took so long to kind of get to this point, from a private chain to a public chain, to then go after that market segment.
So anyways, I wanted to play that clip from that gentleman from Canton Strategic Holdings, because I believe, like I said, that was one of the first times that he spoke. Moving on to a massive announcement that just took place yesterday, I believe, from it was either yesterday or today. Digital Asset posted it directly. But before we get into that, just to show you guys the level of research, it's just so funny what we pay attention to. April 28th, I posted this piece about Keiko joining Canton Network and how this is what real adoption looks like, and how Keiko then went and joined the ISDA, and how that connects in some way, shape, or form to Canton, because of Canton partnering with the ISDA back in 2019, and how it's all a big web. If you can see the web behind the scenes, you can see the connections, you can see how these representatives, for example, the CEO of Keiko, what I'm going to show you guys today is how she used to work at HSBC. We know HSBC did what with their Orion blockchain platform. It's on Canton Network. And so there's just so many connections behind the scenes that show you that Canton is going to be one of those industry leading experts that, you know, runs part of the plumbing of the new financial system moving forward. So this is that post, and this is just from April 28th. I wanted to show you guys. Then the next day, I came out with this video showing you guys how the CEO of Keiko directly talks about Canton Network in this Trade Talks interview on the NASDAQ podcast. And this is from the day after, April 29th. And then yesterday, after having told everybody that there is for a fact the connection with Canton and ISDA, the International Swaps and Derivatives Association, look what a few days after, so 2 days after I made all that content predicting that, you have freaking Digital Asset posting this with Yuval Ruz. So it says here, if you want trade 24/7, you must be able to move collateral 24/7. Yuval Ruz joins ISDA CEO Scott Amala to discuss the most compelling use cases for derivatives markets and what it actually takes to get from today's infrastructure to tomorrow. So we're going to listen to this for the first time, but it is just interesting how I made some content projecting that Canton had some formal relationship with ISDA. And then a few days after, boom, Digital Asset posted an interview with Yuval Ruz and freaking the ISDA CEO. Come on now, y'all. CYPRX research is on another level. I love this stuff. Check it out. Let's listen to what Yuval Ruz here has to say, and we'll go from here, and I'll continue to go down the rabbit hole and show you some of these interconnected webs behind the scenes.
Welcome to the ISDA AGM studio. I'm joined by Yuval Ruz, co-founder and CEO of Digital Assets. Yuval, thanks for joining us.
Great to be here, Scott.
Well, the topic is tokenization. You're very involved in that effort. We're trying to understand what the best way to tokenize things for the derivatives market. We're very bullish on collateral. How do you see things playing out?
Well, you know, everybody in tokenizations are talking about freedom for retail, which is a great mission to have. But I think about 2 years ago, I made a post that I think collateral management is the killer app for blockchain. So as you can imagine, we're very focused on collateral management.
What kind of assets do you see are first movers that will help catalyze the transition?
Sure. So we announced a partnership with DTCC recently to tokenize U.S. Treasuries, U.S. equities. We've also announced partnerships with JP Morgan, HSBC, Lloyd's, LCH, and Visa around bringing money on chain, in addition to stable coins like Circle. I think the combination of the most liquid assets plus cash instruments are going to be the most interesting assets to focus on.
So you've got a lot of the participants. You've been working on the technology for some time. You have been doing trades in certain asset classes. What are the kind of the hurdles and challenges that we're going to be facing to get implementation?
Sure. I actually think that, you know, when we explain the opportunity and the use cases, it's very easy to explain it. Better capital efficiency. If you want to trade 24/7, you must be able to move collateral 24/7. Actually, where the hard part is, how do we move from today's world to tomorrow without disrupting the entire market? So it's actually working with organizations like yourself on making sure that we don't have to reimagine the entire legal system and contract structure all the way from zero. It's working with a lot of the intermediaries that are doing some of the risk management, collateral management systems for the clients, for them to actually integrate to the technology so customers can just be the beneficiaries of the technology. I actually think that those are, in my opinion, the more interesting areas to invest, because again, describing the use cases and the benefit is easy. How do you actually move clients to use them is the challenge.
So new technology, same legal structures.
I like how he talks about how collateral is going to be the killer app for blockchain. And we know that Canton was chosen by the DTCC, word for word. Here you have Dan Donnie from the DTCC talking about this exact same thing. And he specifically says the same vocabulary words as
And the foundational transaction in finance is collateral. So most people think liquidity really comes from trading activity, that's what makes a difference, my ability to convert dollars to shares of Tesla. Yeah, that's important, but by far that's a drop in the bucket compared to transactions in liquidity that have to do with borrowing and lending. So there are transactions. Repurchase agreements are the way that banks get liquidity. So they take assets, high quality assets like treasuries, and when they need cash, they post them as collateral and borrow cash from one another in a model called repurchase agreements or repos. That transaction is the most dominant transaction of any globally on a daily basis. Over $20 trillion a day. I think it's even more than that. But anyway, roughly that amount is in that transaction. Well, it turns out blockchain is the perfect technology. Perfect. It's like tailor-made. It's the killer app for blockchain to do collateral management.
But I think about 2 years ago, I made a post that I think collateral management is the killer app for blockchain. So as you can imagine, we're very focused on collateral management.
He literally says the same exact vocabulary words as Dan Donnie here, that collateral management, blockchain is the killer app for all of this. And then that phrase, the killer app, makes me feel like Yuval Ruz has been in on a conversation behind the scenes with Dan Donnie, or somebody from the DTCC where this rhetoric, this vocabulary is the same. So anyways, I just wanted you guys to hear Dan Donnie from the DTCC say the same exact vocab words that Yuval just said, that killer app, right? All right, so back to the ISDA thing and back to the Keiko markets. All right, so in markets, this is from 2 days ago. In markets media interview, CEO of Keiko discussed Keiko's expanding role in institutional digital asset markets. So remember, we had the announcements of Keiko working with Canton, then Keiko joining ISDA. Then today we have Yuval Ruz chilling with the CEO of ISDA, being asked the question, and the same exact rhetoric and vocabulary that the DTCC is using, Yuval Ruz uses on the interview with ISDA. And now fast forward to show you guys how the rabbit hole continues, how it's all part of the plumbing of this new financial system. We got this announcement from Keiko. So this discussion, you can come over. You can see Keiko joins ISDA to support institutional digital asset markets. And this is this interview from Keiko's CEO. Keiko aims to enable new generations of on-chain products. This is just from the other day, 24th of April. So again, within the last 30 days, let's read thoroughly through this. It says, Keiko said in a statement on the 23rd of April, 2026, that it had joined ISDA, the Derivatives Market Association, which Sorbrin said reflects the increasing integration of digital asset markets and capital markets and financial market infrastructure. In March this year, the S&P Dow Jones Indice in Keiko, and again, remember, the S&P just hit brand new all-time highs, just announced the tokenization of the iBox U.S. Treasuries Index, which marked the first time that a major index provider made a financial benchmark available as a native digital asset on a blockchain. Now, on a blockchain, which blockchain? We're going to show you. It was Canton. With embedded index data distribution, licensing, and permissioning, the two firms aim to potentially bring together other indices on chain. Then down here, this is another question she was asked, and her response to this says, I believe that blockchain technology would eventually become the underlying infrastructure for capital markets to move collateral and execute contracts more efficiently. Remember what Dan Donnie said just now? Remember what Yuval just said, how collateral management, killer app for blockchain, Dan Donnie, killer app for blockchain. We're seeing in real time Canton being used for this. In such a future, capital markets on chain, state of the world, where smart contracts orchestrate financial workflows, my conviction was that reliable data would be absolutely critical to enable disintermediation contract execution. And remember, they just launched this iBox US Treasury for the first time. Marks the first time that a major index provider made a financial benchmark available as a native digital asset on a blockchain, right? So if we come down, it says in 2016, where did she resign from, y'all? To create Keiko, who's now partnered with Canton and ISDA CEO, interviewing Yuval Ruz. Come on now. She resigned from HSBC. Remember that. I highlighted that in purple. We'll full circle back to that. HSBC's global equity and capital market team and moved to Paris to grow and scale Keiko in the early years. We had no clients, no team, limited market interest, and the enormous amount of hard work. Nearly 12 years later, Keiko has grown into the leading independent provider of cryptocurrency market data and analytics. What has been useful in your current role from your banking career? Over the first decade, Keiko, and so again, mind you, she's being asked now what has been useful from her banking career and where did she come from, HSBC. Over the first decade, Keiko acted as a trusted data provider, enabling financial institutions to understand and interact with digital assets, originally crypto markets, by delivering clean and accountable market data and analytical solutions. Today, Keiko also delivers critical data, Keiko indices, and infrastructure to bridge traditional finance and digital asset markets, connecting the established global financial system with the emerging world of tokenized assets, stablecoins, and financial innovation. Having worked in the banking environment gave me the ability to see the potential of digital asset tech, but also to be realistic about what needs improving and what doesn't. Seeing both sides of the coin has made it possible for me to shape Keiko into the infrastructure that bridges legacy systems and the digital world. Then it says here, why did you bring the iBox US Treasury Index on chain? Because remember, it mentioned that this happened on a blockchain, right? And here's where she goes on to talk about Canton. US Treasuries are increasingly being brought natively on chain, with initiatives like the DTCC and their moves onto the Canton network being a prime example. As the underlying securities became available on blockchain infrastructure, there's a natural opportunity to bring the index layer on top. Tokenizing the IBEX US Treasuries Index was the logical next step, making an institutional grade benchmark available on chain so developers, counterparties can build financial products with both the index and its underlying asset on the same infrastructure. Importantly, this isn't just about publishing the price of the benchmark on chain. The S&P Dow Jones Indice and Keiko have tokenized the iBox US Treasury Index as a programmable, permission data asset that can encapsulate index data, licensing rights, and access controls simultaneously. The benefits are significant. On-chain distribution gives the S&P Dow Jones better auditability and instantaneous reporting on how their IP is used, compared to TradFi's delayed volume reporting and month-long settlement cycles. The token plus smart contract architecture is also composable and reusable. The wrapping can be tailored to each use case without renegotiating a new license scheduling, which massively speeds up time to market. AUM turnover tracking, which is heavily manual in traditional markets, can be verified on-chain, enabling new commercial models such as daily fee collection. And with Canton specifically, reporting stays private for institutional use cases like swaps while remaining public where appropriate, simplifying distribution across both product types. And then down here, it mentions the IBEX tokenized index is proof of a point of what's possible when you design a fully tokenized index. And it says right here, this is the plumbing, this is what matters, and we've built it to scale. So I'm showing you guys, Canton is part of this plumbing, right? This is the lady from the CEO. This is an interview. Her responses from these questions. She mentions Canton. She talks about how it's the plumbing, how we've built it to scale. You got Keiko joining Canton, Canton joining ISDA back in 2019, Keiko joining ISDA this year, and now you got CEO Yuval Ruz sitting right here on an interview that was posted how many days ago? Let's look. Just today, I believe, April 30th or yesterday, has 31 views directly on the ISDA freaking YouTube page, right? Come on now. Now back to this HSBC reference. So remember, connecting and showing you how this is all a web. Where'd this lady come from? HSBC. And what do we know about HSBC? What network did they choose? It says right here, HSBC, Goldman Sachs, and BNP Paribas have each deployed Canton-powered solutions. Specifically, HSBC's Orion chose Canton for its bond and private asset tokenization platform, right? I don't think that's a coincidence. Not whatsoever, right? We have key representatives that left the banking system to go and build digitally native solutions for the industry, TradFi, to come on chain. And later on down the road, 12 years later, after leaving HSBC, who also chose Canton, who does her organization choose? Canton, right? So very interesting, to say the least. We also had this massive announcement from Grayscale. Grayscale putting it very plainly as they openly just placed their bets And one of those bets is on Canton Network. So if you come over to the Grayscale website, you can read thoroughly through this report yourselves. It's pretty lengthy, so I'm not going to do that for you guys today. I'll just read some of the highlights in regards to Canton, but this was put out just the other day on April 29th. And you can see the post as well directly on their X profile. It says, Grayscale Research says tokenization is a $300 trillion megatrend, and only 0.01% is on chain so far. Assets like ETH, Solana, Canton Coin, BNB, AVAX, and Link appear to be the key tokens. Interesting, right? So what did Grayscale say? Of course, over time, that they believe that much of the $300 trillion securities markets, along with other types of assets like real estate, will eventually migrate on-chain, highlighting Ethereum, Solana, and Canton, which will serve as the foundation for tokenization and tokenized assets. They mentioned the tokenization megatrend. And then here they say, in this context, value accrual refers to how economic activity on the blockchain translates in returns for the network. Value from tokenization can accrue to smart contract blockchains through several reinforcing mechanisms. Higher levels of issuance, trading, and transfers generate more fees, creating direct links between network usage and demand for native tokens. In some networks, fees are burned or redistributed, connecting activity to supply dynamics. As such usage grows, network effects can further concentrate liquidity, developer, and capital reinforced demand. That's going to come into play once we read something that Yuval Ruz had posted just the other day in response to a question, but we'll come back to that, right? Revenue generating value that can accrue from the actual underlying utility of the network. And here it says, Canton demonstrated production readiness to serve the requirements of major institutional capital today. Canton exploded onto the scene in 2026 with major institutional partnership announcements like Nomura and Mizuho, and an increase in network users and participants. Notably, the DTCC, the primary clearing settlement infrastructure for the U.S. capital markets, has selected Canton as an initial supporting network for its tokenization services under the SEC's No Action Letter framework. It also leads all blockchains in terms of the total capital on chain, with over $348 billion in tokenized asset value. As a result, Canton has a distinct opportunity to build an early lead. The network recently introduced Visa, Circle, and Apollo Global as a key contributor to their super validator list, adding to a network of over 60 institutions. If Canton continues its success in onboarding financial institutions, it could start to create a network effect and reinforce its position as a primary venue for institutions in this initial phase of adoption. And that's coming from Grayscale, not me. If you want to know where to find the type of research that we went over in today's call and many deep more rabbit holes like this, again, you guys can always head over to CYPRXtrading.com. Matter of fact, let me just show you all, for everybody that's on this call and that wants access to like real research, not this overinflated, hypey bullcrap that everybody's always following on the internet. Like, you want access to hundreds of these panel discussions that never get brought to the mainstream masses. Our research team is constantly dropping these gems inside the CYPRX Discord in the research section. I mean, you got all these sections here to dive into, all the documents, all the panel discussions, all the articles that never make it to the mainstream that show you guys all these crazy developments that are happening. All of it's inside our Discord. Our researchers literally never sleep. It's a global team of individuals that are dedicated to bringing people the realest information in the game. No overinflated price predictions. You got all the regulatory updates, all the documents from all these large organizations and entities like the freaking BIS, the World Economic Forum, you know, all that stuff. You go into our regulated section where digital banking, AI, agentic, cybersecurity, right? You can find the craziest documents about this digital transformation. Highly suggest you guys trying it out for a month and just giving it a go to see what information you're going to stumble upon in this community, right? Huge organizations, representatives, institutions on stage, all these panels, the people that should be being listened to and just aren't, right? It's crazy to me that this is the type of stuff that everybody in crypto should be watching, but nobody does for some reason. It's very hard to find this stuff, right? So anyways, tap in with us. We'd love to have you on the team. Many blessings to you guys. As always, be cognizant, be aware out there, and we'll see you all next Friday. Everybody take it easy and enjoy the rest of your weekend. You guys have a good one.